He did charity in silence until a video changed everything. James Michael took a deep breath as he balanced the hot meal containers in the insulated bag. For 2 years, he had followed the same routine every morning before work, delivering food to homeless people in downtown Philadelphia, always in silence, always discreet. It was when he handed a meal to Mr. Walter, with his trembling hands and white hair, that a phone's flash illuminated his face for the first time. The woman filming smiled with satisfaction as she captured every second of the moment. James barely noticed what was happening, simply bidding the elderly man farewell with a warm wave before heading to work at the auto repair shop. While James changed car oil, completely unaware of what was coming, Ashley Johnson was editing the video in her apartment in Rittenhouse Square. She was a digital influencer, searching for content that would touch people's hearts. The video of the young man handing food to the elderly gentleman seemed perfect for her audience of over 200,000 followers. "Guys, look at this beautiful moment I witnessed this morning," she wrote in the caption. "An angel on earth caring for those in need." Within hours, the video had thousands of shares and emotional comments. Across town in Fishtown, Barbara Wilson was cleaning pots at the boarding house she had managed for 15 years when her neighbor Susan knocked on the door, phone in hand. "Barbara, you have to see this. It's James, your son." Barbara dried her hands on her apron and took the phone. When she saw James handing the meal to the elderly man, her face twisted in anger. She recognized that container. It was from her boarding house. "That boy is stealing food from our home to give to strangers on the street," Barbara exploded, handing the phone back to her neighbor. Susan tried to soften the situation. "But Barbara, what he's doing is so beautiful." "Beautiful, nothing. While I work myself to the bone keeping this place running, he's out there giving away our food. What if the guests go hungry?" Barbara spent the rest of the morning seething, wondering how many times this had happened without her knowing. When James arrived for lunch, she was waiting in the kitchen with her arms crossed. "James Michael, can you explain this to me?" Barbara said, showing him the video on her phone. James's stomach dropped as he saw his own image on the screen. "Mom, I can explain." "Explain what?" "That you're stealing food from our boarding house." "I'm not stealing, Mom. I buy the ingredients with my own money and cook early, before the guests wake up." "Liar. Do you think I'm stupid? I recognize my own part." James lowered his head. It was true that sometimes he took leftovers that would otherwise go to waste, but he always replaced them by buying more ingredients. "Mom, it's just leftovers that would have been thrown out anyway." "Leftovers, nothing. That's food that could have gone to other guests. You're putting our family at risk for strangers on the street." The argument was interrupted by the arrival of Mr. Walter, the elderly man from the video. He had gotten the boarding house's address from neighbors and wanted to thank James in person. "Excuse me, Mom, I'm looking for the young man who helps me every morning." Barbara stared at the man in his worn clothes and tired expression. "You're the one from the video?" "Yes, ma'am. I came to thank your son. For 2 years he's brought me hot meals, and I've never been able to properly thank him." James stepped forward hesitantly. "Mr. Walter, you didn't have to come all this way." "Yes, I did, son. You have no idea what this food means to me. Ever since I lost my job at the university because of my illness, you've been a light in my life." Barbara looked surprised at the well-spoken man in front of her. "You worked at a university?" "I was a literature professor for 30 years, Mrs. Barbara. But a stroke changed everything. I lost my motor coordination, my speech was affected, and I ended up losing my home, my family, everything. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like the video and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out." Now continuing, James felt his eyes well up. He had never asked about Walter's personal story. He only knew the man needed help. "I also lost my father when I was 12, Walter. I know what it's like to feel lost." The elderly man placed a trembling hand on the young man's shoulder. "That's why you help, isn't it? You understand the pain." Barbara watched the conversation in silence, starting to better understand her son's motivation. But still, she was worried about the future of the boarding house. Meanwhile, Ashley Johnson was celebrating the success of the video. In less than a day, it had already surpassed 1 million views and was generating a considerable amount in ad revenue. She decided to make a second video, this time looking for James to interview him. With the help of comments on the first video, she managed to find out he worked at a mechanic shop in the central area. She arrived there with her makeshift filming crew, consisting of a friend who was a cameraman. "Hi, are you James, from the charity video?" James was under a car fixing the brake system when he heard the woman's voice. He crawled out from under the vehicle, his face smeared with grease. "Yeah, that's me. Why?" "I'm Ashley, the one who posted the video. I'd love to interview you." The shop owner, Frank, appeared with a scowl. "James, what's this about a video? And why have you been coming in late every day?" James tried to explain that he was late because he made deliveries early in the morning, but Frank wasn't interested in excuses. "Either you show up on time or find another job. I have customers to take care of." Ashley took advantage of the situation to film more content, but her presence only made things worse for James. Frank grew even angrier at the commotion in the shop. "Enough! James, you're fired. I don't want this circus here." James was stunned. In a matter of seconds, he'd lost his job over a video he didn't even know existed. Ashley pretended to be concerned, but inside she was thrilled at the drama unfolding. "Wow, what a mess, but don't worry, James, I'm sure something good will come of all this." She handed him a business card. "Call me. Let's talk about partnerships. Your video is getting a lot of engagement." James didn't quite understand what she meant by engagement, but he pocketed the card and headed home to break the bad news to his mother. When he got to the boarding house, he found Barbara fielding phone calls. She was visibly stressed. "James, what kind of trouble have you gotten into? People have been calling all day, some praising you, others criticizing. Some are even canceling reservations because they think we're being unfair to you." James sat at the kitchen table and told her about being fired. Barbara grew even more upset. "Great. Now how are we going to pay the bills? The money you made at the shop helped cover expenses here." Just then, the phone rang again. It was a long-time guest canceling her reservation for next month. "Mrs. Wilson, I saw your son's video online. How can you be so harsh with such a kind young man? I'd rather stay somewhere else." Barbara hung up the phone, frustrated. "See? People are judging our family without knowing our reality." James felt guilty for all the problems he was causing. "Mom, I'll figure it out. I'll look for another job first thing tomorrow." "What about the deliveries? Are you still going to keep doing that?" James stayed silent. He couldn't imagine leaving Walter and the others who depended on him without food. "I don't know, Mom. I can't abandon people who need help. And what about our family? Don't we need it too?" The conversation was interrupted by the unexpected arrival of Jessica, James's ex-girlfriend, who had broken up with him 6 months earlier. She walked into the boarding house with a forced smile and clothes more put together than usual. "Hi, James. I saw your video on social media. So proud." James was surprised by her presence. Jessica had never shown interest in his charity work when they were together. "Hi, Jessica. What are you doing here?" "I came to support you, of course. I always knew you were special." Barbara rolled her eyes. She'd known Jessica since they were kids and was aware she only showed up when she wanted something. "James is going through some trouble right now, Jessica. He lost his job today." Jessica pretended to be shocked, but inside, she was calculating how she could benefit from her ex-boyfriend's sudden fame. "That's outrageous. Firing someone for doing good. But don't worry, love, I'm sure this will turn out positive." James found it strange she called him love after months of no contact. That night, the video hit 2 million views. Ashley was making a fortune from the ads, while James tried to understand how his life had turned upside down in a single day. The next morning, James woke up early even though he didn't have a job. He couldn't break his routine of deliveries. He prepared the meals with ingredients he bought with his last savings and headed out. When he reached the spot where he usually met Walter, the elderly man wasn't there. James grew worried and decided to look for him. He asked other homeless people and learned Walter was sick, staying at a temporary city shelter. James went to the shelter and found the frail old man on a makeshift bed. "Walter, how are you feeling?" "James, my boy, didn't expect to see you here. When I didn't find you in our usual spot, I got worried. Walter gave a weak smile. Felt sick last night. The shelter folks brought me here, but I'm better today. James handed him the meal, which Walter ate slowly, but with visible gratitude. James, I need to tell you something. After that video came out, a lot of people reached out wanting to help. There's even a social worker trying to get me benefits. That's great, Walter. But it's not just that. I talked to others you help here at the shelter. Dorothy, Robert, Emily. They all speak so fondly of you. You have no idea how many lives you're touching. James was moved by the old man's words. I'm the one who's grateful for the chance to help. But I feel bad you lost your job because of us. It wasn't because of you, Walter. It was because of whoever filmed without asking. As James left the shelter, he found a group of people waiting for him. Others he regularly helped, who had organized themselves to find him. Dorothy, a 65-year-old woman who lost her home in a fire, was the first to speak. James, my dear, we heard you lost your job because of us. We feel terrible. Robert, a middle-aged man who lost everything to addiction but was recovering, added, We don't have much, but we wanted to give back somehow. Emily, a young woman with 2 small children, held an envelope. We managed to gather some coins and bills. It's not much, but it's from the heart. James was touched by the gesture, but couldn't accept money from people who needed it more. I can't take this. You need it more than I do. James, Dorothy said, you taught us that accepting help is also an act of love. Let us give back a little. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing, while James was talking with the people he was helping, Ashley was at an upscale cafe with a digital marketing entrepreneur, Patricia Turner, discussing how to further monetize the video's success. Ashley, you've created a phenomenon. This young man could become a brand, said Patricia, stirring her coffee. Exactly what I thought. Imagine the partnerships we could make. But there's a problem. I saw in the comments that people are questioning the fact that you're profiting from his story without sharing anything with him. Ashley made a face. She hadn't thought of that. What now? Simple. You offer him a percentage. Make it seem like it was a partnership from the start. Everyone stays happy. Meanwhile, Jessica had found out where James was and showed up at the shelter with a calculated smile. James, honey, you're here. I looked for you at the boarding house and your mother said you'd left. James introduced Jessica to the people he was helping, who were puzzled by her presence. Everyone, this is Jessica. Mrs. Dorothy, with the wisdom of someone who had lived a long life, quickly sensed the young woman's intentions. Are you James's girlfriend? Jessica hesitated for a second. We're very close. James looked at her strangely, but didn't correct her in front of everyone. When they left the shelter, James questioned Jessica. Why did you say we were close? You broke up with me months ago. James, I was confused back then. That video made me realize you've always been special. I want to get back together. James wasn't convinced. He had known Jessica for years and knew she wasn't one for selfless gestures. Jessica, I appreciate it, but I don't think it's a good idea. At least let me help you. I have some ideas for you to use this fame to get resources and help even more people. James didn't know that Jessica had spent the morning researching ways to associate herself with his image to gain social media followers. That afternoon, Barbara received a visit from Susan, her neighbor, who brought bad news. Barbara, have you seen what they're saying about the boarding house in the neighborhood group? What now? Susan showed her the messages on her phone. Some people criticized Barbara for not supporting her son, while others defended her position. The discussion was dividing the neighborhood's opinions. Some are saying you're a heartless mother, said Susan, reluctant to share the information. Barbara felt wronged. How can they judge without knowing our situation? I have a business to run, bills to pay. I know, Barbara, but people only see the pretty side of the story. Susan hesitated before continuing. And there's one more thing. Mrs. Edith cancelled her reservation for next month. She said she doesn't want to stay in a place where kindness isn't valued. Barbara felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. Mrs. Edith had been a guest for 5 years and always paid on time. When James got home in the late afternoon, he found his mother sitting at the kitchen table, surrounded by unpaid bills. "How was your day?" asked Barbara without looking at him. "Complicated. I went job hunting, but no one's hiring." "What about the deliveries?" "I kept doing them. I can't abandon those in need, Mom." Barbara sighed deeply. "James, I need to show you something." She pulled out an old yellowed notebook from a kitchen drawer. "I found this today while organizing your old things." James recognized the notebook immediately. It was where he wrote down details about the people he helped. "Mom, you shouldn't go through my things." "Wait, let me speak." Barbara opened the notebook and began reading. "Mr. Walter, former teacher, lost everything after a stroke, prefers warm milk with coffee, diabetic, avoid too much sugar. Mrs. Dorothy, lost her home in a fire, has 3 grandchildren, allergic to shrimp. Robert, in recovery, doesn't drink alcohol, likes talking about football." James was surprised his mother had read everything. "Son, how long have you been keeping these notes?" "Ever since I started helping. I want to know what each person likes, their special needs." Barbara kept flipping through the notebook. "And here, monthly expenses, extra ingredients, $200, meals, $150, total saved from salary, $350. James lowered his head. "Mom, I never used money from the pension. It was always from my own savings." "And why didn't you tell me?" "Because I knew you'd worry and try to stop me." Barbara felt a tightness in her chest. Her son had been carefully planning every move for 2 years to avoid burdening the family. And here, what does this mean? "Remember to stretch the beans on Tuesdays to have leftovers for your George." "Your George only comes on Tuesdays. It's the day he gets off work early." Barbara closed the notebook, moved. "Son, why do you do this?" James stayed silent for a moment. "Remember the stories Dad used to tell before he passed?" Barbara nodded. James was 12 when her husband died of cancer. He always said he'd been saved from hunger by a stranger when he was young, that it changed his life, and that one day, if I could, I should do the same for someone. Barbara felt her eyes well up. They hadn't talked about her late husband in years. "Your father would be proud of you," she said, for the first time since the video went viral. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Ashley and Jessica, who showed up together at the boarding house. James was surprised to see them talking. "Hi, James," Ashley said excitedly. "I came with an amazing proposal." Jessica added, "I told Ashley how special you are. We have incredible plans." James eyed them suspiciously. "What kind of plans?" Ashley pulled up a chair and sat at the table. "James, your video is making a lot of money in ads. I want to split the profits with you." "Split the profits?" "Yes, and we can partner up. You become an ambassador for brands that support social causes. Imagine how many people you could help with the money you'll earn." Jessica chimed in. "And I can be your assistant, handle social media, schedule interviews." James looked at his mother, who watched silently. "I don't know. I never thought about making money from this." "But James," Ashley insisted, "you lost your job. You need income, right?" Barbara noticed both women had their own interests in the situation. "Girls, can you let James think about the offer? He needs time to decide." After they left, Barbara talked to her son. "What did you think of the proposal?" "I don't know, Mom. It feels weird to earn money by helping others. But if you can help more people with more resources, that's true. But I don't trust their intentions." Barbara agreed. "Jessica especially. I've known her since she was little. She only shows up when she wants something." That night, James couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about Ashley's proposal and Jessica's strange behavior. The next day, he decided to talk to Walter. The elderly man had improved and returned to the shelter. "Walter, can I talk to you?" "Of course, son. Sit here." James told him about the offer to monetize his charity work. "What do you think, Walter?" The old man reflected for a moment. "James, you know I was a teacher, right? I worked with young people for 30 years. I know. I learned that intentions make all the difference. If you accept this offer to get more resources and help more people, it could be good. But if it's just for the money, you'll lose the heart of what you do." "How can I tell the difference?" "Simple. If you feel like you're doing charity to feed social media instead of feeding people, it's time to stop. Walter's words made a lot of sense to James. That afternoon, he went home determined to refuse Ashley's proposal. But when he arrived at the boarding house, he found a surprise. A group of local business owners talking with Barbara in the living room. "James," his mother said, "these people came looking for you." The leader of the group, a 50-year-old man named Richard Thompson, introduced himself. "James, I own a chain of bakeries here in Philadelphia. I saw your video and was deeply moved." "Thank you, Mr. Richard. We'd like to make a proposal. How about if our bakeries donated the bread they don't sell each day to your charity work?" James was surprised by the genuine offer. "That would be amazing. But how would it work?" A woman in the group, Mrs. Karen, who owned a butcher shop, added, "We thought of creating a donation network among the neighborhood businesses. Each one contributes what they can." James felt this proposal was different from Ashley's. Here, the focus was truly on helping more people. "And what do you want in return?" Richard smiled. "Nothing, except knowing we're helping those in need. Your story inspired us to do our part too." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing, Barbara watched the conversation with growing interest. For the first time, she saw people wanting to help her son without ulterior motives. "Mrs. Barbara," Richard said, "you can also participate. What if the boarding house became a distribution point? We could organize everything here." Barbara hesitated. "I don't know. I'm afraid it might disrupt the business." "On the contrary," Mrs. Karen said, "this could bring positive visibility to the boarding house." James looked at his mother, waiting for her answer. "Can I think about it?" "Of course," Richard replied, "but know we're here to help, not to interfere." After the business owners left, mother and son talked about the proposal. "What did you think, Mom?" "It felt more sincere than that influencer and Jessica's idea." "I thought so too. They seemed genuinely interested in helping." "James, I need to apologize to you." "Why, Mom?" "For doubting you, for not understanding your motivations from the start." James hugged his mother. "You were protecting our family, Mom, I get it. But now I see you were protecting other families too. Your father would be proud." That night, Barbara made a decision. She prepared a special meal and asked James to take it to Walter. "Mom, you don't have to." "I want to. I'd like to get to know the people you're helping better." When they arrived at the shelter, Walter was surprised to see Barbara. "This is my mom, Walter." "Pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Barbara. Your son is an angel." Barbara handed the meal to the elderly man. "Walter, I want to apologize. At first I didn't understand the importance of what James was doing." "Mrs. Barbara, it's natural for a mother to worry about her son. But now I see he's just continuing a tradition of kindness he learned from his father." Walter grew curious. "How so?" Barbara told the story of her husband, how he'd been helped by a stranger in his youth and how it shaped his character. "So James is honoring his father's memory," the old man concluded. "Exactly. And I want to help too." From that day on, Barbara became actively involved in her son's charity work. She accepted the business owner's proposal and turned the boarding house into a food distribution center. Ashley was furious when she learned James had refused her offer and chosen to work with the local business owners without seeking fame or money. "James, you're missing a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity," she said, showing up unannounced at the boarding house. "Ashley, I appreciate your interest, but I prefer to keep things as they are. But you could become famous, get national recognition." "I don't want fame. I just want to help those in need." Ashley left angrily, realizing she could no longer profit from James's story. Jessica, on the other hand, tried one last desperate move. She showed up at the boarding house pretending to be pregnant. "James, we need to talk. I'm expecting a baby. Yours." James was shocked. "Jessica, that's impossible. We haven't been together in over 6 months." "But remember that last time?" "Jessica," Barbara interrupted, "stop this lie. I know you're making this up to take advantage of my son's situation." Jessica realized she'd been caught and left the boarding house in shame. "You won't get rid of me that easily," she shouted before leaving. As the weeks passed, the donation network grew. Other local businesses joined the initiative. Richard's Bakery donated bread, Karen's butcher shop contributed meat nearing its expiration date, and a produce stand provided fruits and vegetables. James organized an efficient distribution system. Every morning, he and a group of volunteers went out to deliver food to homeless individuals at different points in the city. Barbara's boarding house became the operations hub. She coordinated volunteers and managed donations. Her initial worry that this would hurt business proved unfounded. On the contrary, many people began staying at the boarding house specifically because of the social cause. "Mom, are you happy with this change?" James asked one afternoon, watching his mother direct volunteers in the kitchen. "Very happy, son. I feel like I finally understand what your father meant when he spoke about the importance of helping others." "And the boarding house, it's not causing problems?" "Quite the opposite. We're always full. People want to be part of this in some way." A month after the video went viral, James received an unexpected visitor, Nancy Miller, a social worker from the city. "James, I'm here to make an official proposal." "What kind of proposal?" "The city wants to hire you to coordinate a municipal hunger relief program." James was surprised. "I don't have the qualifications for that. You have something more important, hands-on experience and credibility. 2 years feeding people on the streets is worth more than any degree." Barbara stepped into the conversation. "How would it work?" "James would receive a salary to do exactly what he's already doing, but with city resources and official support." "That means we could help many more people," James said excitedly. "Exactly. And you could expand the work to other neighborhoods in the city." James looked at his mother, who smiled in approval. "I accept the proposal." Nancy explained the program would start in 2 months, the time needed to complete bureaucratic procedures. In the meantime, something unexpected happened. Jessica reappeared, this time with a lawyer. "James, I'm here to inform you I'm suing you for unauthorized use of my image." "What do you mean?" Barbara asked indignantly. The lawyer explained. "My client appears in some photos with James that were shared on social media without her consent." James was confused. "What photos?" Jessica showed screenshots of old pictures that had been shared by people who knew them when they were dating. "You're gaining fame using my image. I want compensation." Barbara couldn't take it. "Jessica, you have no shame. First you faked a pregnancy, now this." "Mrs. Wilson, I have rights. If you don't pay, we'll go to court." James grew worried. He didn't have money for a lawyer or compensation. That's when Walter showed up at the boarding house with a well-dressed man. "James, meet my brother-in-law, Mr. William Reynolds. He's a lawyer." William greeted everyone. "Walter told me about the situation. I'm offering my help free of charge." "Sir, I can't afford—" "James, you took care of my brother-in-law when he needed it most. This is the least I can do." Dr. William analyzed the case and reassured James. "This has no legal basis. Old photos shared by others don't grant any right to compensation." Jessica and the lawyer left empty-handed, knowing their scheme hadn't worked. Walter took the opportunity to share some news with James. "Son, I got the benefit from the city. I'm going to be off the streets." James was moved. "That's wonderful news, Walter. And there's more. I found a small room to rent very close by. I'll still be able to volunteer with the charity work." That's when Dr. William made a surprising revelation. "James, I need to tell you something. Walter and I are brothers-in-law because I'm married to his sister, but 15 years ago, Walter saved my life." "How so?" "I was going through a very tough time. I had lost an important case and was thinking of giving up on everything. Walter was the one who gave me the strength to keep going." Walter added, "William was sitting in a park, crying. I talked to him, offered what little I had. Sometimes a word of support means more than anything." James realized the chain of kindness was bigger than he had imagined. 2 weeks before officially starting his job at City Hall, James received another unexpected visit. It was Ashley, but this time with a different attitude. "James, I came to apologize." "Apologize?" "Yes, I realized I used your story for my own benefit, without thinking about the consequences for you." James invited her in. "Ashley, I don't hold any grudges. I know you lost your job because of my video. I feel responsible. But if it weren't for the video, I wouldn't have met the business people who helped me, and I wouldn't have gotten the offer from the city. Ashley was surprised. You managed to turn things around. We did. Me, my mother, and a whole network of good people. James, I want to make things right. How about I produce a free documentary about the importance of genuine charity? How so? Educational material, non-profit, showing how small actions can change lives. I can donate it to schools, NGOs. James looked at Barbara, who nodded in agreement. If it's truly to educate and inspire, I accept. Ashley smiled, relieved. I promise this time will be different. No exploitation, just inspiration. On the day James officially started his job at City Hall, Barbara's boarding house was filled with people celebrating. Walter, Dorothy, Robert, Emily, Richard, Karen, Dr. William, Nancy, and dozens of other volunteers who had joined the cause were all there. Everyone, James said, moved. When I started delivering meals 2 years ago, I never imagined we'd come this far. Walter spoke up. James, you have no idea how many lives you've touched. Not just those who received food, but those who learned to give. Dorothy added, you taught us that anyone can make a difference, no matter how much they have. Richard, the bakery owner, announced, everyone, I want to share that our donation network is expanding to the entire metro area. The celebration was interrupted by a surprise no one expected. A bus arrived with several elderly people. It was a group of ladies from a nearby neighborhood who had watched Ashley's documentary and decided to visit the boarding house. We're from the St. Anthony Neighborhood Senior Ladies Association, said the group's leader, Margaret. We came to see your work and offer our help. Barbara was moved as she welcomed the visitors. You're all very welcome, Margaret explained. We do crochet, embroidery, knitting. We can make warm clothes for donations. And we also know how to cook, added another lady. We can help prepare meals. James realized the movement had grown beyond his most optimistic expectations. Over the months, James's city program became a national model. Delegations from other cities came to learn about the work. Universities sent students for internships. But for James, what mattered most remained the direct contact with those who needed help. One morning, while delivering breakfast in a new part of the city, James encountered a situation that deeply moved him. It was an entire family living under a bridge, a father, mother, and 2 small children. Good morning, James greeted them. I brought breakfast for you. The father, a 40-year-old man named Steve, accepted the food gratefully. Thank you so much, young man. The kids haven't eaten since yesterday. How did you end up here? The mother, Sarah, explained, we lost our home when Steve lost his job. We couldn't pay rent. Is there no family to help? No, sir. We're from another state. We came here looking for work. James was especially touched by the children's situation. How old are they? Emma is 5 and Ethan is 3. Are they in school? Steve lowered his head. How can they go to school living on the streets? James had an idea. Steve, what kind of work do you do? I'm a painter. I worked at a company for 15 years, but it closed. And you, Sarah? I was a cook at a restaurant. James smiled. I think I can help you. He remembered that Richard was renovating one of his bakeries and needed a painter, and Barbara had mentioned needing help in the kitchen at the boarding house. Steve, how about I introduce you to a friend who needs a painter? That would be amazing. And Sarah, my mother needs help in the kitchen at the boarding house. That might work for you too. The couple was overwhelmed by the possibility. But where will we live? Sarah asked. James thought for a moment. Leave that to me. I'll figure something out. That afternoon, James spoke with his mother about the family he'd met. Mom, I have an idea, but I want your opinion. Go ahead, son. What if we fixed up the back room for this family to stay temporarily? They could help at the boarding house in exchange for housing. Barbara didn't hesitate. Of course. Let's get the room ready today. Are you sure? There are 2 small children. James, children bring joy anywhere. And this family needs a chance. The next day, Steve, Sarah, Emma, and Ethan moved into the boarding house. Steve began working with Richard, Sarah helped Barbara in the kitchen, and the children were enrolled in a nearby school. 3 months later, the family rented a small house in the neighborhood and moved out of the boarding house, but they continued volunteering with the charity. It was around this time that James received an offer that left him torn. A major non-profit organization from New York City wanted to hire him to coordinate a national project. "James," said Margaret Brooks, the NGO's representative, "your work here in Philadelphia has become a model for the whole country. We want to expand it nationwide." How would that work? You'd move to New York to oversee the program's rollout in 20 US cities. James was tempted, but worried. What about the work here in Philadelphia? You'd train a local team to keep it going. That night, James discussed the offer with his mother. "What do you think, Mom?" "It's an incredible opportunity, son. You could help so many more people. But I'm afraid of abandoning those who depend on me here. James, you've built such a strong network that the work can continue without you." "Are you sure?" "I am. Walter can oversee deliveries, Richard can manage donations, and I'll handle distribution here at the boarding house. You planted seeds that are already bearing fruit." James was still undecided when a letter arrived that changed everything. It was from Dorothy, the elderly woman who had lost her home in the fire. "Dear James, I'm writing this letter to tell you that you gave me back hope in life. When I lost my home, I thought it was the end. But you showed me that there are always people willing to help. Now I've gotten a job at a cleaning company and am saving up to rent a little house. But the most important thing, I've started helping other seniors at the shelter. You taught me that receiving help is good, but giving help is even better. If you decide to go to New York, know that you go with our blessing. Your work here will continue through all of us who have learned from you. With affection and gratitude, Dorothy Thompson." After reading the letter, James made his decision. "Mom, I'm going to accept the offer in New York." "Are you sure?" "I am. But on one condition, I'll come back every month to check on the work here." "Perfect. And I'll keep running the boarding house as the base of operations." A week before James left for New York, the community threw a farewell party. It was held in the neighborhood's central square, complete with music, food, and many heartfelt speeches. Walter was the first to speak. "James, 3 years ago you found me lost and gave me not just food but hope. Today I have a home, dignity and purpose in life that's priceless." Steve, the painter James had helped, also shared his thoughts. "James, you didn't just give me work. You gave me back the dignity of being able to support my family." Richard, the bakery owner, announced a surprise. "Everyone, in honor of James, our chain of stores will create a permanent fund for the charity program. That way, there will always be resources to keep the work going." The party ended with the screening of Ashley's finished documentary. The footage showed the entire transformation that had taken place in the community, all starting from a simple act of kindness. On his last day before the trip, James made his final morning delivery as a resident of Philadelphia. He visited every spot where he used to hand out food, saying goodbye to each person in person. "We're really going to miss you, Mr. James," said Emily, the mother of 2 who had also gotten a job and her own home. "But he'll be back every month," reassured Walter. "And the work will go on." When James returned to the boarding house to pick up his bags, he found one last surprise. Barbara had prepared a photo album filled with memorable moments from the past few years. "So you'll always remember where it all began," she said, handing him the album. James flipped through the pages and saw pictures of himself with all the people he'd helped over the years. On the last page was a photo of his father with a note Barbara had written. "Your father always said that whoever saves one life saves the whole world. You've saved dozens of lives, son. Keep saving worlds out there." James hugged his mother, moved. "Thank you for everything, Mom. For understanding, for supporting me, for joining me in this mission. Thank you for teaching me it's never too late to start making a difference." At the airport, James was seen off by a group of friends. Walter spoke for everyone with a final speech. "James, you came here as a young man with a kind heart. You leave as a leader, an inspiration, a life changer. Take our gratitude and our certainty that the whole United States will be better because of your work." 6 months later, James returned to Philadelphia every month as promised. The national program was being successfully implemented in several cities. During one of these visits, he received news that moved him deeply. Barbara had been invited to give talks on social entrepreneurship at universities. "Mom, you're a speaker now." Who would have thought, right, son? A boarding house owner teaching university professors. And what do you talk about in your lectures? I tell our story. How a viral video didn't just change your life, but an entire community. And how do people react? They get emotional. Many teachers say they'll include our case in their studies on social impact. Walter, who now coordinated the morning deliveries with impressive efficiency, brought good news about the program's numbers. "James, we've tripled the number of people we serve, and there's more. 4 other cities in Pennsylvania have asked to implement our model here." Richard had also expanded his involvement. "James, I managed to convince the Business Association to officially join the program. Now we have over 100 establishments donating regularly. But the best news came from Dr. William. James, the city approved the creation of a center for urban charity best practices. It'll be built right here in the neighborhood, with your boarding house as its central hub." Barbara was proud. "A best practices center? That's right, Mrs. Barbara. People from all over the United States will come here to learn how to do charity in an organized and efficient way." 2 years after leaving for New York, James received word that he'd be honored by the Philadelphia City Council as an honorary citizen. At the ceremony held in City Hall, James gave a speech that moved everyone present. Council members, officials, family and friends. "When I first started handing out meals on the streets, I never imagined I'd get this far. But I've learned that small gestures can create big changes. The video that changed my life was filmed without my permission, but today I'm grateful for it, because through it I discovered I wasn't alone in wanting to help others. There was an entire community just waiting for a chance to do good. This honor isn't just mine. It belongs to Mrs. Barbara, my mother, who turned a boarding house into a charity hub. It belongs to Walter, who, even in hard times, always had words of wisdom. It belongs to Richard, Karen, and all the business owners who understood their social role. It belongs to every volunteer who gives their time to care for those in need. Today, what started with a single meal has become a national movement, but the heart of it remains the same: one human being caring for another. I thank God for giving me the chance to discover that true wealth lies in sharing what we have with those who have less. After the speech, James was approached by an elderly man he didn't recognize. "Young man, I need to speak with you." "Of course, sir." "My name is Edward Thompson. I'm Richard's father, the owner of the bakeries." James greeted the man. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Edward." "James, I came here because my son never mentioned it, but I was the one who taught him about charity when he was a boy." "How so?" "Back in the 70s, I was a baker in a small rural town. Every day I gave bread to families in need. My son grew up seeing that." James was intrigued. "Why did Richard never say anything?" "Because he didn't want you to think he was doing charity out of family obligation. He wanted his motivation to be seen as genuine. But that makes it even more beautiful, Mr. Edward." "It's true, and know that I'm very proud of him, and of you. You're carrying on a tradition of kindness I learned from my own father." James realized he was witnessing something incredible. "Mr. Edward, may I ask you something?" "Of course. By any chance, did you know a man named Robert Wilson in the 60s? Mr. Edward's eyes widened. "Robert Wilson, a young man I helped when he was starving." "He was my father." The old man grew emotional. "I can't believe it. Your father was one of the first people I ever helped when I started doing charity. My father always said he was saved by a kind baker when he was young, but he never knew his name." Mr. Edward hugged James, tears in his eyes. "So you're Robert's boy." He always came back to the bakery to thank them and share how his life was improving. "That's why my father taught me about charity. Because of you. And you taught my son how to organize charity work. The circle is complete." At that moment, James fully understood his father's words about how an act of kindness can span generations. On his way back to New York that night, James called Barbara to share his discovery. "Mom, You won't believe what I found out today. He told me the whole story about his Edward and the connection to Dad. Son, that gives me chills. Your father always talked about that baker who saved his life. And to think that Baker's son became our partner in charity, that shows there are no coincidences, James. There are purposes. You're right, Mom. Now I understand why everything happened the way it did. From the viral video to meeting Richard, it all had a greater purpose. 3 months after this revelation, James received an unexpected invitation. The Department of Health and Human Services wanted to appoint him as a national consultant for hunger relief policies. James, the secretary said during the meeting in Washington, D.C., your work has become an international reference. We want you to help develop public policies based on your experience. Madam Secretary, I'm honored, but my experience is very hands-on. I'm not sure I have the theoretical knowledge for national policies. James, you have something many experts lack: credibility from someone who's lived what you're proposing. How would it work? You'd continue coordinating the NGO's project but help us draft national guidelines for urban charity programs. James accepted the challenge, but with one condition. He wanted to include Barbara as a community management specialist consultant. My mother turned a boarding house into a community hub. She understands better than any expert how to mobilize a neighborhood. The secretary agreed immediately. Perfect. We need people like Mrs. Wilson shaping these policies. When James shared the news with his mother, she was surprised. Son, are you sure? I don't know anything about politics. Mom, politics is about people, and you understand people better than anyone. But what about the boarding house? Walter can manage it while you're in Washington. You can keep living in Philadelphia, just traveling when needed. Barbara took on the role, becoming the first department consultant appointed through hands-on urban charity experience. 6 months later, the United States launched its first national urban charity program based on Philadelphia's model, to be implemented in every major city. At the White House launch ceremony, James delivered the keynote speech. Mr. President, distinguished guests, fellow Americans, today we launch a program born from a simple act, giving a meal to someone hungry. But what we've learned over these years is that hunger isn't just for food. People hunger for dignity, for hope, to be seen as human beings. This national program goes beyond distributing meals. It recognizes that every person in need has a story, dreams, and the potential to rebuild. When I started doing charity, I thought I was just feeding bodies. Now I know I was feeding souls, awakening callings, creating a solidarity network that spread nationwide. This program is the fruit of thousands of anonymous Americans choosing to make a difference. They're the real heroes. After the speech, journalists from around the world sought James for interviews. His story had captured international attention as an example of how individual actions can turn into public policies. But for James, the most moving moment was when his Walter, who had been specially invited to the ceremony, approached him. James, my son, you've come so far. No, Walter, we've come so far. All of this started with our conversation at the shelter. Remember when I said you were feeding lives? I do. Now you're feeding an entire country. James hugged the elderly man who had become more than a beneficiary of his charity. He had become a mentor, a friend, a foster father. Walter, you might not believe it, but I found a letter from my father before I left. What letter? James pulled a yellowed paper from his pocket. My mother found it among his things. It's a letter he wrote to me when I was 10, but it was only meant to be given to me when I turned 30. And what did it say? James read aloud. My dear son James, if you're reading this letter, it's because you've turned 30, and I hope you've become a good man. I want you to know that when I was young I went hungry. I was saved by a kind man who gave me bread when I needed it most. That gesture changed my whole life. I promised I would teach my son to do the same for others. If you've chosen the path of kindness, know that you're honoring not just my memory, but the memory of all those who were once saved by simple acts of love for others. Keep planting seeds of hope wherever you go. With eternal love, your father Robert. Walter wept as he heard the letter. James, you haven't just honored your father's memory. you've multiplied his legacy millions of times. And the most amazing thing is that we now discovered the kind man who saved my father was Richard's father, our charity partner. Life has these coincidences that aren't really coincidences. Exactly. Their purposes unfolding through generations. End of story. So what did you think of this story of transformation through charity? James started by quietly handing out meals and ended up changing public policies across the entire country. Tell us in the comments, do you believe small gestures can lead to big changes? Have you ever experienced something similar? Leave a like if the story moved you. And most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other inspiring stories like this one.